Hey, welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden, broadcasting to you live from Ottawa on a very overcast, rainy day here in our nation's capital, on the precipice, on the cusp of a federal budget. We'll have more about that. Yes, and an update on the Ostrich farm when we return in mere moments.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist.
Okay.
We'll do it live.
Okay.
We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Yeah, we're still doing it live. Thanks for joining me today. We called this show the Big Bad Budget Battle, and that's supposed to sound like an old Dragnet episode. You remember the old Dragnet episodes? About 52 to 59, I believe, in black and white, came back in color from 67 to 70. You remember those? Yeah. Jack Webb, great shows, great shows. And Jack was not liked, by the way. And I don't let me get distracted here, but the other side of me, of course, is entertainment, which I should do more of because politics can get you down. But Jack Webb was a freewheeling, fun-loving guy, married to Julie London at one time, who was one of the most gorgeous and best female singers of the 1950s and 60s. And the two of them used to go to nightclubs and just listen to jazz music. And I did that the other night at a local hotel in Ottawa, Brook Street, not Brookfield, no, Brook Street. And they have live jazz. One of the few places left in Ottawa where you can sit and listen to great music like that. And I just think I stayed for 2.5 hours. Wonderful, wonderful. And I used to perform myself. So why am I telling you this morning? Probably because I'm just so fed up with politics at the moment. I don't know where this is going with the budget. I think it's obvious that there's a blame game going on here between the Conservatives, the NDP, and the Liberals, the Bloc. I really don't give a damn about the Bloc except that they're there, that they constitute some votes. I don't think they should be sitting in the House of Commons because they're only there to tear the country apart. If you want to do that, fine, go back to Quebec. Do it from Quebec, but don't do it from the House of Commons. Don't collect a paycheck from the taxpayers and a pension from the taxpayers for trying to break the country apart. I hope all of you out there agree with that. I've been saying that since the Bloc became a party and first sat in the House of Commons. But once again, I digress. Let's show this clip from CTV. It's a bit of an update about what's happening here.
2 days before Mark Carney presents his first federal budget, it's still not clear which party will help the minority Liberal government pass it.
We don't need a higher cost of living through a higher costed budget. We need an affordable budget for affordable lives for all Canadians.
The Conservatives and the Bloc both say they're willing to help on their own terms. Pierre Poilievere is calling for fewer taxes and less spending.
The inflation that spending has caused has landed on the shoulders of single moms and seniors and others who can't pay their bills.
But new polling by Nanos Research for CTV News shows more Canadians are willing to accept a higher level of spending if it means investing in programs for Canadians. Support for the idea is up to 47%, from 35% 2 years ago. And
Note bien, NB. If you ever wonder where NB comes from, it's Latin or Italian. Can't remember with. I think it's Latin for note well. Note bien. Listen, Canadians split on budget up. You listen to that news report, it sounds like, more Canadians want the government to spend more money. And this is Nick Nanos' reporting, polling, by the way. And I do find that Nanos tends, whether it's wittingly or unwittingly, whether it's because of the way they phrase the questions, I find that Nanos polling favors the Liberals. So 47% of Canadians want the government to spend more money. 48% want a balanced budget. Well, more are still in favor of a balanced budget. So, but that's not the gist of what you get from this report.
Neck and neck with those hoping for a balanced budget that cuts taxes.
The single most important thing this budget needs to work towards is increasing investment in Canada. We have both immediate challenges with what we're doing with the United States and long-term challenges around growth and productivity.
Support for infrastructure investment as a top budget priority has doubled since 2023, now just behind tackling the deficit. But healthcare remains the top priority for Canadians, even as issues like inflation, housing, and tariff relief take away some of the focus.
For average Canadians, what they want to see is no cuts to healthcare at this particular point in time, but they're going to want to see investments in the long term.
Mark Carney campaigned on a $4 billion investment in community health care and has repeatedly promised not to cut provincial health transfers.
While the Liberals don't have the votes to pass the budget on their own, they could do it if some opposition members abstained from voting. Asked about that today, Poilievere says his Conservative MPs will be there Tuesday and do their jobs. Heather.
Thank you, Colton. CTV's Colton Prail in Ottawa.
Yeah, thank you very much, Colton. That's it's incredible to me that they would still be playing these games at the last minute. Carney wants the NDP to vote against this budget. That's why he's not meeting with the interim leader, Davies. He's having nothing to do with it. He wants to ostracize the NDP, so the NDP will vote against it. We haven't heard a definitive stance from anybody in the opposition. Poilievre's not saying whether or not they're going to support it or not support it. Of course, they're going to have to listen to it first. They've got their demands in. But does Poilievre want a new election? I honestly don't know if he thinks this is a good time to go or not. We'll look at some polling later. There's never going to be a perfect time for Poilievre to go. Not ever again. That perfect time was just before Justin Trudeau pulled the plug. Had we had an election last year at this time, can you just imagine? It would have been a massive Conservative majority, the largest majority in the history of Canada, surpassing that of Brian Mulroney in 1984 and John Diefenbaker in 1958. Would have been a massive Conservative majority. That's not going to happen anytime soon. Those numbers are not going to come back. But can Poilievre win if he's a couple percentage points ahead? Yes, he can. And can he pull ahead in the campaign? Yes, he can if he doesn't fall for the same BS that he did last time his communications team puts out. And I God help us if Jenny Byrne runs another campaign. I don't think she will. I think it's been made quite clear to her that she's not welcome by the rank and file, the grassroots of the party, and even most of the caucus. Don't do it again, Jenny. So, can he win? Yes, but he needs to get the base out. He needs to talk about the issues the base cares about. Don't become a let's pretend liberal. It's actually something John Turner, remember John Turner? He accused Brian Mulroney of being a let's pretend liberal. And Brian Mulroney in the campaign actually talked like a conservative. I don't think he actually governed most times like a conservative, but in the campaign, he knew he needed to galvanize the grassroots, and he talked like a conservative. I love this exchange here between Vassy Kapelos and Tim Hodgson, the Energy and Natural Resources Minister. This guy is so arrogant, but she nails him to the wall. And I'm not a publicist for Vassy Kapelos. Unlike some other propagandists on YouTube who are constantly extolling the virtues, constantly fawning over Vassy Kapelos. They just love her so much. Well, I think of all the journalists, the high-profile journalists in the mainstream media, I think Vassy probably does the best job. But that's called doing your job. And that's what she should be doing. And she doesn't need a publicist out there amongst half of the conservative YouTubers saying, oh, we just love Vassy. She's so wonderful. And don't be mean to Vassy. But she does an able job here of completely demolishing Tim Hodgson, who I think is emblematic. He's the embodiment of the did I say John? Of the Marxist Carney government. Arrogant. I'm not going to use that word. Not arrogant. I was going to say something else, but arrogant. Arrogant to the point of being annoying chronically. Remember Chrystia Freeland? Remember how she was arrogant and preachy and always talking down to people? Tim Hodgson is exactly like that. And remember, Tim Hodgson is an old business buddy, a business crony of Mark Carney, and one of the few people Mark Carney put in the cabinet because he really believes he's capable and able. Half of the people in Mark Carney's cabinet are completely unfit for cabinet because they're incompetent. And they've demonstrated that not just since they've been in cabinet, but throughout their entire careers. Tim Hodgson has a level of competency, but it's the level of so arrogant, I'm in your face. And I disagree with you, Tim Hodgson, on just about everything you're saying or doing. But I admit, you say it very well. You do it very, very, very poorly.
Also, the U.S. government has taken an ownership stake in 2 Canadian critical mineral companies. There's a recent deal that'll see Cameco, again give the U.S. government increased access to Canadian uranium. Why are we handing the White House so much of our leverage with these strategic assets?
Let me repeat for your viewers again. 26 different deals with 9 different countries, with every single G7 country, along with other allied countries from 4 different continents. The vast majority of those deals were with countries other than the United States. The United States did participate in that. We want them to. We believe in multilateralism. We believe that our supply chains will be more robust if we have many off-takers, not 1 or 2. And this is a win. So I fundamentally reject your premise. What we are doing is aligning ourselves with the G7. We are aligning ourselves with a multilateral approach to solving this problem.
The U.S., though, has been spearheading for a long time, trying to prompt actions from allies, traditional allies, I should say, to counter China's dominance in the critical mineral space. I combine the announcement today, and I take your point that it is a multilateral effort, with 3 other announcements, which give the U.S. government specifically increased access to strategic assets in this country. While at the same time, the White House is throwing down tariffs, the ambassador is lambasting us, the president is referencing us as the 51st state. How do you reconcile that for Canadians? Why are we handing that leverage over, Minister?
So let me give you a little bit of a history lesson. For the last many years, people have been talking about the challenges of critical mineral supply chains. It was our prime minister. It was our prime minister who was the head of the G7 in Kananaskis, in Alberta, who said Canada will take the lead. Canada proposed a critical minerals production alliance. It was a Canadian initiative. We got the agreement of the other G7 countries. We suggested the other countries appoint critical mineral envoys, which they all did in response to our request. And since the summer, we, Canada, have been taking the lead with our critical mineral envoys, working with the critical mineral envoys of 9 other countries, including every single G7 country, to turn that talk into real action. And that real action is $6.4 billion of Canadian projects now moving ahead to go from talk to reality. I think that's a great example of Canada punching above its weight.
Thank you, Minister, for the history lesson, but it doesn't address the substance of my question around why.
Thank you, Minister, for the history lesson. Nice comeback. but it doesn't address.
We are allowing the U.S. government, not U.S. companies, the U.S. government, increased access to strategic assets at a time when we are engaged in a trade war, at a time when the Prime Minister has specifically said the relationship as we know it with the United States as far as economic and security interdependence is over. Is that not the converse of what your party and your government has told Canadians?
Again, I don't think you have it. It's accurate.
Again, I just don't think we're talking at the same intellectual level. I don't think this conversation is at all coherent, largely because you don't seem to understand the point. What an arrogant SOB. Right.
Question around why we are allowing the U.S. government, not U.S. companies, the U.S. government, increased access to strategic assets at a time when we are engaged in a trade war, at a time when the Prime Minister has specifically said the relationship as we know it with the United States as far as economic and security interdependence is over. Is that not the converse of what your party and your government has told Canadians?
Again, I don't think you have it. It's accurate. We have never said we don't want to trade with Americans. Americans have been great trading partners. What we've said is we want to diversify and grow our trading relationships. What the Prime Minister has said is we will significantly grow our trading relationships with other allies who share our values. What did we just do? We just announced 26 deals with 9 different countries, including every single G7 country. We are doing what we said we would do, which is diversify our trading relationships, grow our relationships with our allies. That is what we've said from the very beginning. That's what Canadians expect us to do. We are not proposing to shrink our relationship with the Americans. We are proposing to grow our relationship with others.
Are you sure that you and your party colleagues have never said that you're proposing to not keep the relationship where it is with the United States? Because I remember the Prime Minister saying our old relationship we had with the U.S. based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations is over. That is the message, with great respect, Minister, that Canadians received during the campaign and after. I understand that what you did today is about multilateralism, but not everything on the critical mineral file falls into that category. And the examples I provided are about deepening the relationship with a White House, with a U.S. government that has taken direct aim at our country.
She gets 4 stars out of 4 for that question, for that statement, for saying, without saying, Mark Carney lied consistently, chronically, constantly during the election campaign with the elbows up BS. He had no intention of changing the trade relationship with the United States. He hasn't done anything with the United States since becoming the elected Prime Minister. Mark Carney has failed miserably. Yeah, we've got little trade deals with countries that matter virtually not at all with our trade. Our largest trading partner remains the United States, and Donald Trump says, I ain't talking to Mark Carney. For how long? He won't say. Could be a long time. And that's the most important trade relationship. And you can sign deals with little countries that nobody even knows can find on a map. But you've got to take care of business. And Mark Carney's failed to do that. That's the one thing he said he could do, was take care of business. I'm an international banker. I understand Donald Trump. I understand the United States. They respect me. Donald Trump doesn't respect Mark Carney at all. Just come into the Oval Office and call me a transformative or transformational president, and Brookfield might get some good deals out of us. But I still think you're a simpering little do-nothing grifter. That's exactly what Donald Trump thinks of Mark Carney. So here we have Tim Hodgson licking his lips, just saying, oh, God, how dare you tell the truth about Mark Carney and his Liberal cabinet? Yeah, we all lied. We all lied during the campaign, and we'll lie again. If there's an election campaign, and I think it's 50-50 right now, folks. I'm saying it's 51-49 for an election. I think there's a good possibility we're going to be in another election because of Mark Carney's ego. It's going to be Mark Carney's ego versus Pierre Poilievere. That's what this election is going to be. And I think the NDP will once again be a distant third. The Bloc will be there, but who the hell cares what they have to say about anything? And it's going to be Mark Carney's ego, I'll say it again, versus Pierre Poilievere. That's what we're going to anticipate. And if Pierre Poilievere falls into the liberal trap again about making this about Pierre Poilievere versus Donald Trump, he's crazy. He's got to talk like the Pierre Poilievere who went to all of those acts to tax. What am I thinking of? Those fantastic rallies. That's what I'm thinking. Sorry, brain fart, as we used to say in the military. Those fantastic rallies across the country where he mobilized, he galvanized, he motivated, he inspired conservatives. Remember at those rallies, he talked about not a single member of my caucus or cabinet. I think he said both cabinet and caucus will be allowed to go to Davos, Switzerland to attend World Economic Forum conferences when I'm prime minister. And that got him the biggest standing ovation of anything he said every time. That's what the grassroots want to hear. That's what Pierre Poilievere has to say. Okay, not every day. He doesn't have to get out and do an anti-globalist message every day. Yeah, he can stick to fighting crime. He can stick to jail, not bail. He can talk about safe streets and safe communities. But he needs to talk about a little more that's important to conservative voters, small c conservative voters. He needs to inspire them in this election so they come out in huge numbers to vote for that party. If he wants to win, that's what he needs to do. He needs to sound a little like Maxime Bernier and the People's Party of Canada. Because if they're not afraid to tackle these issues, they know they're not going to win this next election. And maybe that has something to do with the fact that they have a lot more courage and bravery to talk about issues that Pierre Poilievere doesn't. But if only the Conservative Party of Canada would realize that it shouldn't be a question of courage or bravery. It should be a question of common sense to talk about so many of these issues that matter to conservative voters. And it matter to common sense voters. Talk about freedom of speech in Canada. How the Liberals tried to destroy it in a few short months. 4 surveillance censorship bills in front of Parliament. That was the focus of the Mark Carney government, not getting a trade deal with the United States. That was the last thing on Mark Carney's mind. He did everything possible to sabotage it, along with Doug Ford of Ontario. Mark Carney worked very hard on censorship and surveillance bills, and that's the only legacy he has since winning the April 28th federal election. That's what conservative voters, and that's what common sense voters on all sides of the spectrum need to be reminded of. This is a Carney government that wants to shut your mouth and put you in jail for saying things they disagree with. Anyway, great question from Vassy. I think she put Tim Hodgson. She nailed him to the wall. She put him in his place. Here's Pierre Poilievere talking to, I think, all of the least favorite journalists of all of us who call ourselves principled conservatives. Rosemary Barton has always been in the pocket of the Liberals. She talks that way. She really loathes Pierre Poilievere. But I think Poilievere does a great job of fencing with her here.
Like everywhere Mark Carney goes, with these grand meetings and photo ops, we end up with more tariffs. His failures abroad are costing us at home.
He met with the Chinese president, though, and they made a decision that their officials were going to get together and try and solve the trade irritants. He is trying to make some progress, no? You don't see those things as a bit of progress?
What progress? Can you name one tariff line that he's reduced abroad?
No, not at this stage, no.
Not one. No. He said 7 months.
So what would
He's been on 20 trips.
What would you like to see him do then? What do you think is the missing piece here?
Keep his promise.
Yeah, but how? It's easy to say that. It's the how that's difficult.
Well, the how, I said that I would face President Trump and the rest of the world from a position of strength. Right now, we're in a position of weakness. The Americans know we can't sell our goods to anyone else because we don't have pipelines and LNG plants to get our most valuable export to other markets. I would pass the Canadian Sovereignty Act, which would rapidly greenlight and legalize pipelines LNG plants and other
But the
infrastructure.
government is doing some of that. There's an LNG plant that's happening. There are major projects.
Approved by Stephen Harper.
Well, there's an expansion of it. There's an expansion of it. And the Major Projects Office, it does allow them to get around laws and regulations. You know, that's the goal of it.
That's the goal. We're 7 months in, and the clock is ticking. I think we've been through enough goal setting, and now it's time for results achieved, and we're not getting any results. Mr. Carney won't even tell us if he supports an oil pipeline to the Pacific. His energy minister says it's just too hypothetical. What do you mean hypothetical? We had a project that was approved prior to the Liberals taking office. So here we are with no progress on expanding our resources or getting things done. It's all very good that he's setting up these offices and agencies in Ottawa, but I've got news for him. We're not going to make our economy economically independent by setting up new bureaucracies in Ottawa.
I want to ask you about leadership, because I know that it's probably on your mind. You have a leadership review coming up in January. How confident are you that you will be okay, that you will survive that vote?
Very.
Yeah. Why? What makes you confident?
Well, because I'm going to focus on doing my job. And people say, well, you're going to get distracted with this. And the answer is no, because the same thing I have to do in January is what I have to do on Election Day, which is to do a good job.
Yeah.
And that means doing what I was sent here to do by the record 8.3 million people who voted for us, which is to fight for an affordable life, fight for our young people to be able to afford homes, fight for parents to be able to have safe streets for their kids to grow up on. And that's the job I'm doing, and that's why I believe I'll win the support of both the party and the country.
And you think that the party will be willing to give you a second chance? Because the last time they did that was Stephen Harper.
And look how that turned out.
Yeah,
We were
that's
in
right.
power for 10 years. So
but do you think
I'm glad you pointed that one out.
Do you think that they'll be willing to give you a second chance, Mr. Poilievere?
I think so. I'm fighting for the things that our party and our country need. And the great thing about our party is we're united around the things that we believe in and are fighting for. We want balanced budgets and low taxes so people can afford good lives. We want to lock up criminals so that our people are safe. We want to get immigration and borders back under control. We want a common Canadian identity that unites us all. We want to bring back the promise of this country, that anyone who works hard gets a great life. And so the great thing I have, the benefit I have, is a party whose values and interests are aligned with the country's, and that's why I think both January and the next election will go in the right direction.
Listen, really appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for your time.
Enjoy. Thank you.
I want to play another segment from that interview. I think this is a very spirited defense of the use of the notwithstanding clause, in this case, to overturn what the Supreme Court has recently said about possession of child pornography. They said they've struck down the mandatory minimum 1-year sentence. Now, Pierre Poilievere, it always takes courage to say that notwithstanding clause should be used, because according to the liberal media, it's in the Constitution, it's Section 33 of the Constitution, but don't ever use it. Provinces shouldn't use it. The federal government should never use it. It's there, but don't ever use it, because somehow the courts are more democratic than the House of Commons or provincial legislatures. This is, of course, absolute idiocy. There's nothing democratic about the Supreme Court. They do not listen to the people. They are not obliged to listen to the people. They do whatever the hell they want. They impose their ideology, and they're all liberals. Stephen Harper did not appoint a single principled conservative during 9 years. And it wasn't 10, it was 9 years. 9 years as prime minister. Kept on putting liberals in that court, and so did Justin Trudeau. So, which brings us, of course, to what decision they're going to make Thursday morning, but we'll get to that in a minute. But here's Pierre Poilievere making a very spirited defense of the use of the notwithstanding clause.
This ruling is wrong-headed, and I would oppose the ruling, and I would use the notwithstanding clause to overturn it. And my future government will introduce mandatory prison sentences for possession of child pornography so that dirtbags like this go away for a very long time.
Some of the reasoning from the justices was that they could see a scenario where two 18-year-olds exchange images and then have a mandatory minimum imposed on them. I don't know what you make of that reasoning.
I think the Supreme Court needs to get away from these imaginary scenarios. The scenario before them was two men in possession over a long period of time of hundreds of images and videos that were made by torturing innocent children. And with those facts in front of them, their conclusion actually should have been that the sentence should have been much more than the 1 year and 9 months that the two dirtbag offenders receive. They should go away for a very long time. Frankly, if I had my way as a father, I would lock them up and throw away the key.
That, of course, is how Pierre Poilievere has to talk during any upcoming federal election. Now, I want to turn for a minute here to the ostrich farm. We always do a little bit about the ostrich farm because we're down to the last few days, potentially, and I'll have more to say about that in a minute. But I want to show this.
Our 291 days, herd immunity ostriches that deserve the right to live, and the world is watching. It's been a strong tagline and has become very popular, and I'm grateful for that because I believe that every day that goes on, the more people across the world are watching. 39 days since the ostriches have been in the care of Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and 5 days until we have the Supreme Court decision of the fate of all of this life sitting on our farm. So let's go for a walk. Here we are, headed down the laneway. So a few things. The feeding. They have moved a few of those big square alfalfa bales in and are feeding some of that out. We are going to continue to find out exactly how and where and monitor how much grain is going out, as we still witness today them standing on the back of the feed truck, just dumping it out of the feed truck. 31st, yesterday, was the last day of my mom and I's undertakings from getting arrested, just against my mom and I, but our undertakings, which means our ability to go across in the quarantine area is now we can across.
Okay. November 6th, Thursday, Supreme Court will announce at 9:45 Eastern Time its decision on whether to allow an appeal to be heard from Universal Ostrich Farms. That's not a lot of time. And of course, tomorrow there's a budget. One of the biggest days, probably the biggest day in the House of Commons calendar. Having worked on the Hill for many years, I've covered many budgets, not just as a journalist, but as a Hill staffer. And I tell you that all the time. Yes, I was a Hill staffer. And yes, I towed the line politically. That's why I'm an independent journalist today. I don't toe the line. I will criticize whomever I think needs to be criticized. But right now, Katie needs to do a little bit more than walking around the farm talking about how things have gone for the past few weeks. She needs to fight harder in terms of saying the farm has issued a notice to the RCMP that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency has been illegally occupying their farm since September 24th. And they need to get the hell off of their farm. That has to be day in, day out. If they really want some change in the next 48, 72 hours, they need to do that. They also need to appeal directly to the minister about how this is going to be politically catastrophic, because that's the only language politicians understand. They don't care about unity. They don't care about goodwill. They don't care about what's right and wrong. They don't care who's morally right. All they care is who's politically right. And that's what Katie and her mom have to do. I've reached out to Karen Esperson to have her on the show Thursday. Hopefully Katie will be there too. I don't know. To talk about the decision. Now, what's going to happen on Thursday morning? Supreme Court could say we're not hearing the appeal. We'll get to that, what that means in a second or a minute. The Supreme Court said we are going to hear the appeal. That will give the farm untold months to continue to build goodwill, to move public opinion, if in fact it needs to be moved much further, but to continue to get the word out about how their research has been fantastic, how these birds are healthy and have no reason to cull them, how the CFIA has time and time again refused to test them, it refuses to count them, how this farm has provided research that is not just valuable for ostriches and birds, but for humankind. This farm has done invaluable research. CFIA knows that. They put an update out on Halloween. They put an update out saying the research is really not that important. That's absolute BS. That's rubbish. CFIA knows that, and CFIA probably wants that research. This is one of the motivators for this hellish government agency. As I said, I've been pointing out what they've been up to in the wee small hours of the morning, what they could be up to in terms of why are they bringing in these weird machines? Why are people hearing blending noises? Why are people hearing grinding noises? CFIA responded to that by simply saying, we are not liquefying birds. If they really thought that was an outrageous accusation, they would not even have responded to it. The fact they responded to that accusation tells me that there must be some substance to it. And I believe that. I believe that. So we'll see what happens. They have 72 hours. Now, if the CFIA is allowed to slaughter this herd of ostriches and by the Supreme Court on Thursday, how soon do you think that's going to happen? Well, if an election is imminent, the CFIA, I predict, will try to execute that order immediately because they don't want this to become a political embarrassment for the Liberal Carney government during the election campaign. What can the farm do? Legally, very nothing. Very, very little. Well, absolutely nothing, actually, legally. They've expired. They would have expired their last possible option. But they could exercise passive resistance. Easy for me to say, I'm not at the farm. And yes, people would get arrested. But I think it would raise the profile of this fight, of the injustice of what this farm has experienced, of the idiocy of what the CFIA is imposing, what the government is imposing on this farm, of the absolute disgrace of a government that has no respect for private property rights, no time for farmers, and no comprehension of what real freedom and democracy is in this country. That would give them the opportunity to get those messages home even further, to drive those messages home, because believe me, this government does not respect private property. It is in the hands of globalists. It pursues a globalist agenda. And the irony of it all is that the globalist regulations they're following are not even consistent with what the CFIA is doing. The CFIA has gone 2 or 3 steps farther than even the World Organization for Animal Health and the World Health Organization is dictating. They're going farther. The United States is going in the other direction. Our chief trading partner is going the other direction. It's not engaging in mass slaughter of animals. It's stopped doing that. It's not engaged in the so-called stamping out policy. It stopped doing that. It is exercising a rational response to any sort of outbreak of disease. They're using quarantines. If animals develop herd immunity, that's okay. But Canada is hell-bent on this destructive policy, and Mark Carney is hell-bent. So time is precious right now. I don't know what the verdict is going to be on Thursday morning. I suspect, given this Supreme Court, the probability is not good. It's going to be a positive one for the farm, but I don't know. Let's wait and see. And let's wait and see how the farm responds. What should be the response? Because I predict if the Supreme Court says no, this is going to galvanize Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Freedom-loving Canadians who will come to that farm and say, this is our stand for freedom in this country. This is our stand against totalitarian Marxist Carney government. This will be a huge motivator for Canadians who love freedom. And who knows, we could be in the midst of an election campaign at the same time. And where do you think that energy could go? To a politician who says, I embrace what's happening at this farm, not from the perspective of the CFIA, but from the perspective of the Universal Ostrich Farms. I embrace this fight for freedom. I embrace this fight for justice. I embrace what has been going on here to stop the government's dissolution of private property rights, which I know aren't in the Constitution. They damn well better get there. And I reject the government's war on agriculture, war on farmers, and war on private property and livestock and livelihood. That's what this battle has been about since day one. And this is why I've been fighting. I've not pretended that I have been objective about this story any more than I was objective about the Freedom Convoy. I thought it was a moral choice to make. I supported the underdog in both cases. I knew they were going up against the full power of the state, and the state would fight back, and the state would try to crush this opposition. And they did it to the Freedom Convoy with the Emergencies Act. They're doing it right now by intimidation and terrorism and harassment by the full force of the federal government. And this, my friends, has to stop. And that's why I don't pretend to be objective about this story. I think it is another example of Canada's freedom being taken away by a ravenous government that doesn't give a damn about your rights or mine. We'll revisit this again tomorrow. Budget day tomorrow. Tell me in your comments if you think I should do a live stream on the budget. I don't know. Every year, is it worth it? Is it worthwhile? Do you really want? Is it really necessary to hear my commentary about the budget? Because you're all feeling the same thing. I know. But this could be a budget that is polarizing and that really affects the popularity of the Marxist Carney government. So we'll all be watching one way or the other, whether I live stream it or don't live stream it. We need to watch this budget tomorrow because it could lead to another federal election. And my friends, that's the only way we're going to stop the surveillance and censorship bills in front of Parliament, because they will pass with the NDP support, because the NDP no longer respects or loves freedom of speech. It despises freedom of speech just as much as Mark Carney and the Liberal caucus does. So we'll see what happens. Thanks for watching today, folks. God bless. We'll see you tomorrow.